The date today is the 21st of June 2020, and we're here in lonely Banna, Strand, and that's the way it was described in the song. We're here today to remember the weekend of the Irish Rising in 1916 and celebrate the lives of one man of the three that came ashore here on that fateful weekend. The three men that came ashore were Bailey, who frequently used the name of Beverly, Captain Robert Monteith and Roger Casement, and much has been written about the affairs of Casement down through the years, and he's gone into the annals of Irish history and is well written about, but frequently Robert Monteith is forgotten about, and local historian Sean Joseph O'Connor wishes to have the contribution of Monteith remembered in Irish history. But what brought Monteith to this spot on Good Friday 1916? He was born on the 1st of March 1879, and in 1895 he joined the British Army. He joined the Royal Artillery in the British Army, and he fought, of all places, a place that we as youngsters remember well from the movies, the Khyber Pass. Many movies have been made about this spot, and 100 years later it's still in the news almost on a daily basis. The Khyber Pass separates Pakistan from Afghanistan, and I think today it's a well-known drugs route. But that time Monteith served with the British Army as a bombardier. On leaving the British Army, he got a job in Dublin with the British Civil Service, and it was while in Dublin he joined the Irish Volunteers. He was sympathetic to their cause of banishing the British from the island of Ireland, and while he had joined the Irish Volunteers, he still held on his civil service job in Dublin, and he was offered at one stage what we'd call a plum job with the British Army. He was offered a job as an instructor, and he was offered a commission and a good salary, and his wife would have been well taken care of, and he had married a widow with 3 daughters, and his family would be well cared for, but he chose to serve with the Irish Volunteers in the capacity of a kind of a training officer. And it was when this was found out by the British, he was dismissed from his job in the civil service. He was befriended by Tom Clark, and of course Tom Clark, after the failed 1916 rising, Tom Clark was one of those executed. But at that time he had befriended Clark, and he was well respected in the Irish volunteer movement. At that time he left Dublin with his wife and family and returned to Limerick, where he had family, and he spent some time in Limerick before eventually emigrating before his family to the United States of America, where he met John Devoy. John Devoy, of course, had spent some time in jail with Tom Clark, and Devoy was offered a reduction in his sentence if he left the country, and he was banished to America in actual fact. And in America he was trying hard to gain support for the Irish cause, and of course collect money to support the struggle here at home. And when Monteith went to America, he became friendly with Devoy and worked with him. He was later joined in America by his wife and family. In the early 1950s, Monteith returned after his adventures to Tralee into County Kerry, where he was awarded a civic reception by the then Kerry County Council, and he brought a delegation here to Banna Strand to show them where the tree came in on that Good Friday morning. At that time, Captain Monteith expressed disappointment at the sacrifice that Casement, and not he, had made for the cause of Irish freedom, that this spot wasn't marked in some way to acknowledge the sacrifice that Casement had made. And later, through letter writing by him and local historians, led by Sean Joseph O'Connor, the monument was erected here by Kerry County Council. This monument at Banna, Strand, recognises the sacrifices made by both Casement, Monteith and Bailey. The Casement Memorial here in lonely Banna, Strand. In late 1915, October 1915, Casement went on a journey to Germany to secure German help for the revolution in Ireland, to recruit British Army personnel to join the fight for Irish freedom and form an Irish brigade. And it was decided by Tom Clark and John Devoy that Monteith would be the best man to join Casement, because Casement wasn't having much success with the German government, and it was decided to send Monteith to him. And Monteith travelled to America to meet up with Casement and joined him in his efforts to recruit and to gain support from the German government at the time. And that went into early 1916, and at that time Roger Casement was feeling ill, and he was committed to a sanatorium in January 1916. Eventually the Germans, wishing really just to get rid of Casement and Monteith, promised arms, and the arms were loaded on the boat called the Ord, and a U-boat was supplied for Monteith, and Casement left hospital at that stage to travel with Monteith and Bailey and the small troop they had gathered. Another Kerry man who was to feature in events at that time was Lord Kitchener. Lord Kitchener, of course, was from North Kerry, and he was the Minister for War during the 1418 war. Of course, at that time Germany was under blockade as well by the British Navy, and getting a ship full of arms from Germany to Ireland was an arduous affair. On leaving Banna, Strand, they headed towards Tralee as best they knew how. They were fearful of asking anybody for directions, because they didn't know at what house or what sympathies lay in the houses if they knocked on doors, and they were afraid to give the game away. They headed for Tralee. When the trio got some way along the road to Tralee from Banna, Casement wasn't feeling very well at that stage, and is it any wonder he left hospital in Germany to go on to make this trip to Ireland with the gun-running ship the Ord and on the U-boat. And coming ashore in Banna, they took an awful wetting. So you can imagine the condition they were in at that time, cold and hungry and wet. And Casement, feeling the worse for wear, his two comrades left him here at what was then McKenna's Fort near Ardfert in County Kerry. And little did they know about the Ardfert area. They knocked on any one of the houses here, the chances are they would have had some kind of support, but they couldn't take the chance. Little did they know also that at that time they had been seen coming ashore in Banna, and word had gotten out that 3 men had come ashore that morning. Leaving their comrade here, they travelled on towards Tralee. The roads are well paved now, but you can imagine 100 years ago such wasn't the case. Monteith, having basic see on his right hand side that eventually they would meet Tralee. The two travelled on through the Spa and then through the Kerrys until they got into Tralee town. Eventually their journey took them here to the Mulgrave's Bridge area of Tralee. The area is named after Lord Mulgrave, who was instrumental in sanctioning the building of the Tralee Ship Canal. They were heading in the wrong direction at that stage and realised their mistake, and they turned around and they headed in for the town of Tralee. It's a busy junction this morning now in 2020, but you can imagine at that time they met nobody on their journey save for a few farmers with horse and cars going and coming from the creamery, and they avoided any such encounter as it would draw attention to them. On reaching Tralee here, the pair arrived in Dominic Street here in Tralee. Not knowing who their contacts were, they walked up and down this street that's radically changed in the intervening period, and looking at shop windows, see would they recognise a window which displayed some Republican paraphernalia or newspapers, so that they'd know where they were. They eventually put their eye on the window of Spicer's newsagents here in Tralee. It no longer exists. It was where the entrance to the Abbey car park is now, leading from Dominic Street, and Mrs. Spicer welcomed them in, and while waiting to talk to them she discovered who they were, and she sent word to Austin Stack, the leader of the Republican movement in Tralee at that time. Realising that it was more than 18 hours since Monteith and Bailey had eaten anything, Mrs. Spicer sent them here to Lavin's restaurant at number 40 Bridge Street. Everybody, my generation, remembers Jimmy Lavin, who worked in the Kerrymen for many years in the 50s, 60s and 70s, and Jimmy's mother welcomed them in here and gave them a hearty breakfast, a welcomed breakfast. After breakfast they returned back here to Spicer's shop, and while inside the shop a local Republican came in by the name of Joe Millin, and he recognised Monteith. Joe Millin came from Greenview Terrace in Tralee, and in later years he lived there with his family. And we're here now in Pierce Park in Tralee, where that said Joe Millin is remembered here in a plaque dedicated to the Kerry prisoners that were rounded up after the 1916 rising and either put into jail or banished from the country. There sits Joe Millin's name, proudly published. We are now back in the square in Tralee again, just up from Spicer's shop, 50 yards up from Spicer's shop, outside the shop of Gerard Hogan, the well-known businessman from the square. And although the ship, the Odd, wasn't expected at that time, it was expected, and Gerard here in this shop was the custodian of 2 lamps that were to be used to signal the Odd when she did arrive. He was the custodian of the lamps for many years. Also, on the Good Friday night, Captain Monteith spent the night in the AOH, the Ancient Order of Hibernian building here in the square, and we're not exactly 100% sure of which building it was, but it was certainly here in the street. And Austin Stack at that time, Austin Stack had dispatched Billy Mullins of Motherwell Tralee, another volunteer, to Dublin to tell the leaders of the rising that the arms landing had failed, and eventually, of course, the Odd was scuttled out in the bay. While Billy Mullins had been dispatched to Dublin with the message that the arms landing had failed, That's Billy Mullins in the front on the right hand side. He was from Monteith'S in Tralee, one of the Irish volunteers, and working on the orders of Austin Stack, the local head of the Irish volunteers. Monteith was being looked after in Tralee, and the Casement had been arrested in Casement's fort in Ardfert and brought here to the police barracks in Tralee. The police barracks in Tralee was situated in High Street at the top of Day Place, which is where the Dominican Church is, straight opposite the Dominican Church, where the new police barracks in Tralee now stands. On the Saturday, while Monteith and Bailey were laying low, Casement was dispatched through this railway station in Tralee on his way to his eventual death in Pentonville prison. The station in Tralee, which now bears the name Roger Casement Station. Leaving John O'Sullivan's flat in the AOH building. John O'Sullivan was the caretaker of the AOH, and it was his flat he spent Friday night. Joe Millin brought him here to the rink in Basin View in Tralee, where he met all the volunteers that had gathered for the upcoming Rising weekend. He met the commandant in charge of the volunteers, Commandant Patrick Cahill, which was he paid great praise for the coming among women who were the women's branch of the Irish volunteers, and for the way they looked after everybody here at the rink on that evening. There was troops here from Dingle, Castle Gregory, Feenet and Ardfert had gathered here for the Rising. The following morning, word came from Dublin that the operation had been cancelled and the troops were dismissed. It was on Sunday morning that Patrick Whelan, one of the volunteers, brought the word here that the operation had been cancelled from the O'Reilly in Dublin. Everybody returned to their place of residence. Troops went back to Dingle, Castle Gregory, Ardfert and Feenet. Monteith was loud in his praise as well for the Spicer family who looked after him so well in Tralee. After the troops in the rink in the basin in Tralee were dispersed back to their own parts of the country, a discussion was held amongst the volunteers that remained and Monteith, and it was decided that Monteith would join the Ballymac Brigade under the stewardship of Tommy McAllistrom, and they marched up the town of Tralee, showing here is the mall and what it might have looked like at that time, and they put him in amongst their troop, and only 2 people were aware of his identity. The 2 men that knew his identity was John Burns, in whose house he rested that evening, and the following evening he went to the house of the second man who knew him, Tommy McAllistrom. And in Billy Mullins' book about his memoirs and my fight for Irish freedom, he writes about being on the run, and on the run was no pleasant experience. You were ferreted from house to house, from shed to shed, from dugout to dugout, and that was the life of Robert Monteith while he was in Ballymackelliget. While on the run, Monteith spent some time here, and after leaving Arthur Lenihan's house in Ballymackelliget, he spent some time here in Glownaginta in Ballymackelliget. Glownaginta is now a place of natural beauty and often used as walking paths for leisurely country activities. Little do the people know here of its place in history. After spending some time here, Father O'Flaherty took Monteith to Brosna on his way back to Limerick. This is also the area where the last Earl of Desmond was beheaded. Although there is a memorial here to Captain Monteith in Clonagint and Ballymackelligot, Tralee, County Kerry. Monteith spent many months of that year on the run in Munster, and finally he was helped by the Whitefriars in Cork, and they enabled him to escape to Liverpool, where he got a job on a steamship bound for New York. Leaving Liverpool that year, Monteith's health had deteriorated from all those months on the run, and he was not quite well when he took up a job as fireman on the steamship bound for New York. Shoveling coal for the duration of the journey was no easy task for a man that was already feeling unwell. On his arrival in New York, he trained as an auto mechanic and worked at several menial jobs over the next few years. He was always dogged by government officials that were interested in his connection with the Germans, and were threatening his employers that they would be the subject of investigations, and he was always managed to lose the jobs that he had been employed in as an auto mechanic. His luck changed in 1920 when Eamon de Valera appointed him to sell bonds for the Association of the Recognition of the Irish Republic, and he did that job for the next 2 years, very successfully, I might add. After his association with the Association for the Recognition of the Republic of Ireland, he went to Michigan, Detroit, where he joined the Ford Motor Company and worked successfully there until his retirement in 1943. It was after this that he bought a farm in Michigan, and he returned to Ireland briefly to take up residence in Kilcool. On his return to Ireland, he did visit Banna, Strand, where he made that landing on that day, and he pointed out the spot to those who were with him at the time, and finding he couldn't settle in Ireland, he eventually returned to the United States. Captain Robert Monteith died on the 18th of April 1956 after a life of illness brought about by his time on the run in Ireland. As a strange coincidence, on the same day Robert Monteith died, so did the justice who had sentenced Roger Casement to death. I hope you have enjoyed this story of Captain Robert Monteith.